I have a Dyson V6 cordless vacuum. We use it all the time. Absolutely love it. It's a great machine. Lately though, the power bar here, that is good for carpets and things like that. It'll suck for just a second and it'll cut out, and then the vacuum will keep going, but the beater bar here stops spinning. And so I'm going to show you how to fix it. I've done it once before, but eventually these things just need to be replaced. I called the vacuum shop about getting parts. Apparently they're hard to get, and they just recommended buying another used power head. But I'm going to show you the problem that I've been having and how to do a quick fix. So when you flip it over, I've already gone and done this, but basically there's size 10 Torx screws, which is a little guy like that. It's the star. These little star screws. They're here, 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 here. There's one back in here, I believe, and one over here under this cover. A couple there. You take all the screws out, and then of course you slide the bristle brush here out. Get that out of the way. And you open up. It does pry apart. It's there's little clips, so you got to pull carefully, but it'll come apart. And this whole thing comes apart here. Now the problem we're having is here's the motor here that's driven by these wires, which gets connected all the way up the extender tube. So the motor spins fine, and I know that because if you hook it up, it fires up and just stops for a quick second. Now this gear here is what spins the bristles. And so what's happening is inside here there's a bushing, there's a little bearing that gets gummed up basically with hair and debris, and that's what causes, if you try and twist this, like I can barely twist that with my fingers, it's very, very stiff. And so it's actually a safety. This motor says, that's too hard, I'm going to stop so I don't burn out the motor. So what happens is the motor stops spinning this little gear wheel, and then it only will suck air, it won't actually activate the beater. So we'll take this guy apart and I'll show you at least the way that I've been fixing it, and I'm going to keep doing it until the day comes where I need to fully replace my unit. So you disconnect the wires there, the black and the white one, and then there's a screw right there in the center where there's a little bit of silver paint, and then you just kind of wiggle it free, and this whole contraption should just sort of wiggle out, and you sort of have to pop it through in here and kind of play with it a little bit, but it will come out. So what we have here is the motor assembly. Now the motor gets its power from there, and it drives this gear, which spins the belt, which turns this gear, which turns this, which turns your bristle bar. And what happens is over time, inside here is a bearing, and it's a little bit oily because I've added some oil, but what happens is hair and gunk and pet hair, all that kind of nasty stuff gums up this bearing. And so you can see, like, it's very, very stiff. I can barely turn it with my fingers. And so the goal is to try and loosen this up. This bearing is not seized, but it's fighting all kinds of resistance. When you're taking it apart, you don't really need to go farther than this step. I like to, just because you can, well, I just like to, but to go farther, you just remove this screw here, this one in there behind the belt there, and this one here. It's a little bit more work, but it'll all slide apart. I'll show you in a second. So if you want to stop here, you can, and all you're going to work on is right here. Once you've taken all the screws off, you can slide this belt over the small gear, and what you'll see is this whole thing basically just slides out. Now you've isolated just the bearing, and now you can work with that. Now, as I said, I don't know of an easier way to do this. As far as I know, you can't get this thing apart anymore. I don't think any of this comes apart beyond this. But after a few minutes of working it, spinning it forwards and backwards and picking out hair, it does spin already quite a bit easier. And so keep at it. And then, as I said, I do 1 drop of oil or so and just work it in there. And you may get a couple weeks out of it, a couple more months. The last time I did this was probably 6-8 weeks ago. And I think I'm slowly coming around to terms with the fact that I'm going to need to replace this. But I'm just trying to drag it out as long as I can. So it's worth the time. Take about a half an hour and just work at it. Pick away at the hair and the grime, and do your best. Now the whole goal is to try and free up this bearing. It's not seized, but it's just fighting. And so I use this little pick here. It is sharp, so you got to be careful. You don't want to break open the thin plastic protector over the bearing and the ball bearings. But basically you try and use just precision, get a headlamp if you have, get in there if you can, and try and get something small to pick out hair and all that sort of stuff. Eventually you'll eventually lose and you'll have to replace the whole unit. I've looked, you can't really buy these as far as I know. If you can and you find a way, let me know. Put a comment down below. I'd love to know. But my local vacuum shop just basically said you got to buy a whole new power head, and so they're about 120 bucks. And if you're into Dysons, you know that parts aren't cheap, things aren't cheap. So I'd rather prolong it for as long as I can before eventually replacing the whole thing. It's a great vacuum and I don't want to lose it. So just after a few minutes, you see there's already a bunch more hair there. I was spinning it forwards, scraping it out, go backwards, forwards, backwards. Do what you can to work it out. This is just after a few minutes of going. So stuff definitely gets caught in there. And as I said, you want to be careful not to damage that whole bearing assembly. Otherwise, it's just going to become a magnet for more grime once you get it back going. But it's already a little bit easier to spin. And yeah, we're getting there. Now, you don't need one of these oil cans, but I've got one. And so I just use just the slightest little bit here. Just get about a drop in there. And work it in. Now, of course, oil, like grease, will just attract more dirt and dust and grime. So once you're done working it through, do your best to wipe it out. And the goal is to try and get this as much as you can to soak the bearing and give it more chance to spin. So you can actually check how you're doing without putting the whole thing back together. What you need to do is basically get it back in spot here, the motor assembly with the belt. Get it back into position by just temporarily reinstalling it. Do up the screws and of course your power, your black and your white. Connect it to your machine and let's see. So there you go. It works better. Like I said, the more gunk and stuff you get out of here, the better. But already as it is, it's gonna be better than as it was before. So try that. If you know a better way, let me know. Comment below if you know where you can just buy parts for these that won't cost you an arm and a leg or cost you your refinancing your house. Let me know. Now you should have one screw that's longer than the others, these T10s, and the long one goes here. There's a short screw in every corner and a couple under this panel. And once you get this far, then all that's left to do is install the final guard, lock it up, and away we go. Happy vacuuming. Hope this was helpful.